one is job design, operational performance. And this is from a people sense. You know, at the end of the day, we've got to have people, if we decide not to have robots everywhere, we've got to have people actually working on our systems. This would be a lot of overlap between, hopefully, some of the things that you've done in other courses on general management. But of course, there's an overlap. We're talking about job satisfaction, we're talking about some motivational theories, we're talking about individual motivational theories, we're talking about team motivational theories, all sorts of things that is going to increase the levels of productivity of the people that are actually working within our operations part. That's topic number one. Topic number two is on maintenance systems. And for a nuclear reactor, I would suggest to you that maintenance may be particularly important. We've had something happen in the last week. Anybody think what it might be? An earthquake 100 kilometers from where this nuclear reactor is likely to be. Admittedly, it was in Iran rather than in the UAE. But you know, does anybody put that in? Does anyone put that into the to their concerns? They say that the nuclear reactor in Iran could have received an 8.2 yes, an 8.2 earthquake, up to an 8.2, and this one was only 6.2. Yeah, well, what's that saying? I know this is a stretch. I know this is a stretch, but you're talking 100 kilometers away. If in fact you're going to build a nuclear reactor on anywhere near an earthquake zone, there are all sorts of issues involved with that. How would you? I mean, the decision has been made to build it, so it's not a matter of saying no, we can't do it, but how would you actually overcome that? A lot of the maintenance issues that we're talking about, there are essentially three types. And these is one of the last slides. Three types of arrangements that you can make with maintenance. One, you could replace on a regular basis before they break. You know, something's getting loose, so you replace the whole lot. The second one is you inspect on a regular basis to see whether there's something that you need to replace, but that's replacement by inspection. And the third one is one that is used quite commonly, but not with nuclear reactors, I might add, and that is run it until it breaks. I would suggest to you that running till it breaks is not a particularly appropriate strategy for a nuclear reactor. So even in the maintenance parts, which, by the way, I've also linked in to the assignment, and I've done this more with the last ones. Now we know what we were actually going to do than I did in the previous ones. In future courses, which will be no use to you, of course, in future courses I will try to link in more and more with the slides the assignment once we've actually chosen it.
What about the changing with calendar?
The changing?
By calendar. Changing by calendar. That means you change the part at a certain date, regardless of the functionality.
Yes, that's right. That's the option number one. You replace it on a regular basis anyway. And coal-fired generators, coal-fired electrical generators do this type of thing in Australia all the time. Every 3 months, a generator is shut down, and I mean, it's a big deal. It takes about 1 month to replace all of the parts. Whether or not it's worn out or not, it still gets replaced. There's not going to be the likelihood of anything breaking. But I guess new parts will break as well, won't they? So anyway, that's job design and organizational performance is topic one. Then maintenance is topic two. And then the last hour, we're going to spend talking about two exams. Could I have just a show of hands of how many is Chifley? You're all Chifley. Have we got any Atlanta here? Wow, you're a lonely person. I'm going to speak to you for 15 minutes. It's a completely... Okay. All right, okay. I have to be honest with you. The exam for Chifley is infinitely more suitable as an assessment item than the assessment for Atlanta. The Atlanta, I can get this over with very quickly. The Atlanta one is 25 multiple choice questions and 2 out of 4 of the short answer questions. That's all it is. I hate multiple choice. At a postgraduate level, it really shouldn't be multiple choice. Would you agree?
I disagree.
But that's, you disagree?
American way.
But hang on a second. I'm Australian. We're in the UAE. American. Okay. Is that your argument? Yeah. So anyway, I just don't think it's appropriate to have multiple choice questions as that big an assessment on an item. And I think the Chifley way is far, far more fair about an assessment. An assessment, after all, is just to actually interpret whether or not the student has actually learned what he or she is supposed to have learned for that particular topic. And I don't think multiple choice actually cuts it, to be honest. So, and just because one country does that, even at a postgraduate level, doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it right. So, I'll be spending a lot more time, because there's very little that I can actually talk about with multiple choice. But I can tell you the answers. It's either A, B, C, or D. And they sort of change with each question. You see, I'm helpful. But the other ones, we'll go through the process. I want everybody not to be shocked when they come in. I don't think that you will be shocked when you see the exam. It's going to be fairly straightforward, but there's some preparation to do. And I'm going to help you as much as I can. But don't switch off. Atlanta doesn't switch off for this particular one because some of the questions will be, not the multiple choice ones, obviously, but some of the questions will be the same. So, okay. Whoa, where's my laser sword? Bzzz. The topic covers the managerial implications of organizational restructuring, which incorporates theories of job design as a means of improving worker satisfaction, empowerment, and productivity. We're going to discuss setting work standards and performance measures and cover the major categories of performance measurement and how to approach the management of those measurements. Organization structures develop over time and sometimes, or ultimately, hang on just one second. Just one second. You've all seen now that I've got a coat to go with my suit, so I'm going to take it off because I need to move around a bit more freely. And frankly, it's hot. There's my suit. Bought in Bangkok, by the way. So, all right. Over time, when we build up our structures, we change things, and they can become quite cumbersome. You know, our organizational structures. We've never actually designed them to go in this particular way, but we keep adding on, and suddenly we find that we've got this hierarchical monstrosity, this big organizational complex. So restructuring, so this one, when we get to that particular stage, they can become rather dysfunctional. There's no reason for it other than over time it's actually increased in complexity, and suddenly it becomes very dysfunctional. What we need to be able to find out is how we can get rid of that dysfunctionality to get back into the organization so that the organization can run more efficiently. So it can run these organizations. We're looking to avoid bottlenecks in our organizations. So these sorts of restructurings may occur as a result of significant changes in operating environments, such as the appointment of a new CEO. Do you know the term, finish off this term for me if you know it, a new broom, you don't know it. A new broom sweeps clean. A new broom sweeps clean. Yes? So once you get a new broom or a new CEO, in this particular case, that's the analogy, that comes into an organization, that CEO will want to do things in his way or her way. They will want to actually do things differently to show, hey, now I'm the CEO. This is the way that I'm going to do things here. So a lot of organization changes actually occur when this happens. And we've got some significant changes. I'm making this non-gender specific. One of the big jobs on at the moment, and the big challenges on at the moment, is by the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, who happens to be female. She is going to have all sorts of difficulty because the latest trends is showing that the sale of PCs have come down another 14% in the first quarter. Personal computers, sales have dropped another 14%. So if your major part of your business is selling PCs, then you need to be a little bit concerned, regardless of what you're doing. There was an old saying which I'm going to share with you now. Think about this. When you are in the desert selling water and it begins to rain, what do? Thank you. Did you know that before, or did it just come to you? Very good. Excellent answer. That was exactly what this guy said. When I saw it, when I heard it about, crikey, it was 10 years ago. And it was to do with the the record industry. When digital recordings were actually happening, and there was a company called Napster that was peer-to-peer sharing. And he got up and he said exactly those words. When you're selling water in the desert and it begins to rain, you start selling umbrellas. That's exactly what he said. And I thought, that's really important when we're talking about restructuring. Understand that your circumstances have changed. Understand that the reason why you are selling water in the desert is no longer there. So think about something entirely different. Now sell umbrellas. So that's very good. No one's ever answered that like that before. So, okay. So it could be, the changes could occur with a CEO. It could be changed with change of circumstances, such as it begins to rain in the desert. Or it could be a merger with another organization. And mergers with other organizations do change quite significantly the way that you have to do things. Obviously, you want synergies out of the two inputs. So you don't want to keep duplicating it, so the way that you do things may actually change significantly when you join up with somebody else. Somebody could be good at one job, you could be good at another job, and you say, well, why would I want to do this? I'll let this other person do it, this other group do it. But that's a whole new ball game. When you're talking about mergers and acquisitions, there's a whole range of organizational changes that you need to make. But in broad terms here, restructuring just occurs because of these types of big changes in environments. And the goals of restructuring is to support operational processes by reducing organizational barriers. We have created, over time, what may have turned out to be a dysfunctional organization. And we want to actually reduce those organizational barriers. We need to improve one second. Last night I was giving a talk. I was so dry I couldn't say parenthesis. Parenthesis. I just wouldn't come out, so. Now I'm having trouble with satisfaction. Improving staff satisfaction by developing more rewarding roles, and enhancing staff capacity by reducing levels of hierarchy and duplication, facilitating more efficient and effective customer service, and increasing that organization's ability to respond to future change. We know that change needs to occur on an ongoing basis. Hewlett-Packard knows this. Maybe they haven't addressed the issue as well as they should have, or as quickly as they should have, but they certainly are going to have to change their structures of what they're actually doing. Just like the 1.44 megabyte floppy drives. Yeah, they have to change because something else came out. So we don't know what that change is going to be, and nor should we worry too much about what those changes are going to be. What we do have to worry about, however, is the change is going to occur. Some sort of change is going to occur. And we have to be available to make those changes. So it is not the change itself which we need to plan. It is the ability to change. That's what we need to change, because we don't know which direction we're going to go. When to restructure? A significant change in the organization's mission, strategy, or objectives. Missions don't change greatly over time, but strategies and objectives certainly do. The record industry, which I mentioned before, records, CD industry. We could still call it a record industry? We do, don't we? Recording industry, the music industry. The music industry, the Sonys of this world, they had to make major changes to the way that they actually gave their service, because people were being able to get digital copies of everything. So you've got all sorts of new issues like iMusic, but a lot of them, again, it was a short life cycle. And that's in a state of change at the moment. Even as we speak, that is changing, the whole music industry. It would be one of the most difficult operations management jobs at the moment in the world, in the music industry. But at least you get to see some good artists, I guess. The current structure consists of too many levels that present barriers to efficiency and communication. Once you recognize that you've got a very dysfunctional organization, well, you can do something about it. You can have a restructure. Last week, I tried to keep this topical. Last week, there was an ex-British Prime Minister who passed away. And she was Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990, 11 years. Margaret Thatcher. And she was one of the leaders of Britain. Now, I didn't follow British politics that closely, but even now, after she's died, the amount of controversy that she's still engendering amongst Britons was really quite amazing to watch. Some people thought that she was a savior for Britain, and other people said that they destroyed their lives. But she actually went out there and changed the very fabric of British society when she took on the unions and changed a lot of things. I don't want to get involved in that particular politics, but she said, and she led a government which said, no, the unions have got too much power, there's too much inefficiency within the British industry, and there's too much inefficiencies in certain the coal mines in the north of England. She said, no, we can't keep these coal mines open. So she shut the coal mines. essentially after strikes. On the other hand, if you look, and I'm not a great expert on British politics and British organizational change, but on the other hand, there was a guy who led the trade unions who wasn't prepared to negotiate in any shape or form. And I think his name was Arthur Scargill. Arthur Scargill never wanted to even consider compromising. He was very hard line. And that was a big, big mistake, because these changes probably had to occur eventually. And when you have someone who says, I refuse to change, it was like the Luddites. Remember I told you the story about the Luddites? Luddites? Yes? The Luddites who didn't want these advances in technology. So they broke up all of the machines. And that's really what my impression of what Scargill was actually doing with the unions. But the barriers to efficiency and communication was taking place in Britain at that particular time. And Margaret Thatcher was the one who actually came in and changed the way. A great organizational change leader. This is also about to happen in Europe, by the way. It cannot stop. The European Union has got the same sorts of issues now. It's becoming, even though it's very much younger, it's only been around for a couple of decades, but the European Union is becoming very cumbersome, very top-heavy, very bureaucratic. And now you've got the problems of Cyprus with people losing their savings, up to 60% of their savings. Suddenly you've lost 60% of your wealth. You've got Greece, which is still in some strife. You've got Spain, which is in some strife as well. So all of these issues are actually accumulating. So even at a national level, you are going to have changes that take place. But the British example, and I think the forthcoming European one, is going to be levels that present barriers to efficiency and communication, and you need to be able to do something about it. You need to restructure. Now, there is a need to identify resources and or redeploy them to new or expanding services. If you see that something out there that needs to be done, and you have the resources, go out there and do it. But you've got to have the will to actually do it. We're talking about some fairly large restructuring examples here, but even in our own businesses, even in our own organizations, these are very important. For several decades, there's been this trend to flatten organizational strategies or structures, which creates what's known as horizontal organizations. And this model is characterized by the elimination of hierarchy, that is, the guy at the top passing down, and functional boundaries. You know, this is the warehouse manager, this is the marketing manager, this is the HR manager, and this is the accountants, the chief financial officer, the CFO. So all of these people were looking after their own particular areas of expertise in a functional area. In an enterprise environment, you're thinking more about the roles or the processes that each of them can actually combine. And that in itself is, a philosophical move. But the model is characterized by the elimination of these hierarchy and functional boundaries, multidisciplinary teams, not just by functional teams. You set up teams that are controlled by all four of you, and all four of you do this. It's a question that someone asked before we started today about Dagbroeken. And the question that was asked was, why were the teams broken up? Was it you that asked me this? Yes. Why were the teams actually broken up into functional teams, the PC team, the PLC team? It's not really a part of your assignment. You don't need to concern yourself about that too much. But it was because it was functional, because the managing director, who was an electrical engineer, thought of himself, thought of itself as or the project as a functional project. That there were the engineers, the electrical engineers that did that, the mechanical engineers that did that, and the software engineers that did that. And there was no integration whatsoever. What sort of project was it? Was it a electrical engine? Thank you for that. It wasn't an electrical engineering project. It wasn't a mechanical engineering project. It wasn't a warehousing project. It was a warehousing project. The fact that they had nobody across purposes to actually look at that from a warehousing project, which was the nature of the project itself, but concentrated on the components within it. The components in it was indeed mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering. But the purpose of the project was a warehousing project. So you are not, that's a process rather than the function. Yes? The three areas of electrical, mechanical, and software had to work together to build something entirely different, which was a warehouse. It was just almost by accident they happened to have somebody there that was a warehousing person, but that warehousing person was not actually able to involve himself in the design of the project in that way. So those moves to horizontal organizations change the very nature of how we think of management. I can tell you an example of going to working. This is not Coca-Cola. This is entirely different. This is Pepsi-Cola. Completely different example. And it's not Taiwan, it's Singapore. Dagbroeken also had an ASRS system working for Pepsi-Cola in Singapore, a company called Yohep Singh. And Yohep Singh had a very strange organizational policy, which it was very dysfunctional. Not untypical, however, of many Asian hierarchies or organizations. When, as a project manager or operations manager or project leader, you would go to someone and say, okay, I finished this particular part of this operation. Now I want you to sign off on this to say that, yes, this has been done to an acceptable standard so we can move on to the next one. In Australia, we would normally say, well, okay, the person that you've been dealing with, if they know that they've been, they know that you've reached that particular goal, they just sign off, and you move on to the next stage of your project or operation. But this didn't happen with Yohep Singh. In Yohep Singh, it was a very hierarchical. It was originally a family-owned organization, which was bought by an investor in Singapore called, I can't do this without water anyway, NG, Mr. Ng. And Mr. Ng was a very rich investor in Singapore that bought this family business. But the structure of the business was still very hierarchical. It was still very family-oriented, and in family-oriented businesses, you get very hierarchical structures. The family's at the top, and everybody else is down below. So in this particular organization, no one was given the authority to sign off. What we had to do is, once we'd actually finished a particular level and wanted to move on, we would say, well, sign off. But the guy didn't have the authority to sign off, so he would go to his boss to get sign-off. But his boss didn't have the authority either, so he'd have to go to his boss. And his boss didn't have the authority either, so he'd have to go to his boss. Now, unfortunately, that boss was on holidays. So when he came back from holidays, that guy couldn't sign off anyway because he had to go to the big boss. And it turned out there was only one person who could ever make the decisions. But you couldn't go directly to this particular guy. You couldn't go directly to the guy who made the decisions at the top. You had to go through the hierarchical steps. And this became very, very ineffective because it took a long, long time. And here we are, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for somebody to actually sign off. We knew we'd finished this particular part. So these are the types of dysfunctional organizations which horizontal organizations are tending to be able to remove the barriers to those hierarchical organizations. It's a flatter organization that you have more empowerment down through your organization. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about employee empowerment and participation is this key tactic of the horizontal organization. And it involves moving the decision-making responsibility to those who have the best information. The guy at the top that we really have to wait to get the sign-off for has no idea what was going on. No idea. He doesn't know whether it's been signed, that it's been done properly. It's the guy that I originally asked, who's been working on a day-to-day basis. He's the guy who best knows whether it's been signed off or not. The rest is just bureaucracy. But the bureaucracy got in the way of efficiency in this particular case. And if you want to talk about bureaucracy, any French here, by the way? Any French?
Or Canadian.
No, just French. Just French. Oh, bureaucracy in France. You know, bureaucracy is a French word. And you certainly know that when you live in France. It's very, very bureaucratic organizations and becoming very inefficient. And I'm sure that the European Union, the organization of the European Union, has taken on a lot of the French style of bureaucracy. Very bureaucratic organizations. So, but it moves that responsibility to those who know best about that information. And the effective use of teams is this important way of increasing that employee empowerment and participation. We've talked about teams. We went over it and we said, well, you know, we've got different ways of getting our performance out, not as the individual, but team performance. So employee empowerment is a necessary partner for flat organizations or horizontal organizations. There's one thing that we have to remember. The Chinese character for change or crisis is actually itself made up of two characters, two Chinese characters. One, essentially, which means danger, and the other one, which essentially means opportunity. Now, as managers, when new changes come into play, when changes are about to take place, or you making the changes yourself, we tend to see the change as an opportunity. In general terms, we tend to see the opportunity in changes. And we do expect normally that other people will see what we see. But the reality is that the people that are maybe working on the project may not see the opportunities. They may only see the danger. They may only see the danger in that opportunity. So the crisis part is made up of danger and opportunity in Chinese. And the word in Chinese is huizhi, huizhi. Huizhi meaning the crisis or change. So there's always this opportunity which we can see, but remember that there may be many people that are involved in that change process that can only see the danger. This is very important in management terms, that people aren't always as enthusiastic about the change as we might be as leaders. So most project leaders and business managers are not unsurprisingly O types, but the majority of users may be D types, who see threat in the change and might seek to find ways of resisting it. We don't do the resistance in operations management. That links into another topic altogether. But the resistance to those types of changes which occur whenever you put any sort of organizational change into effect is really quite profound. You have to understand the issues of change management of how to involve people in that change process. You can't just give them the change and expect them to follow. There's always going to be some resentment and some resistance of the changes that you actually kick into gear. So, remember, D types or O types. There are, in fact, two types of changes, effectively two types of changes that you can have when you're doing these types of things. One is the radical type of change, and that's restructuring and redeployment of staff. You know, I showed you those little cardboard pits? When we said that sometimes we have to think, we have to change the whole thing. You know, start with a new blank piece of paper and say, how would we do this starting from now? Not based on what we've had in the past, but what we've got right now. A blank sheet of paper. If we were starting from now, what would we do? Rather than relying on historical data, we have inherited this. There's no inheritance within these types of radical changes. Radical changes are therefore much more difficult to sell to an organization and the people within those organizations because it involves big changes in the way that you do things, or it may. Incremental, on the other hand, is simply process automation or refinement of existing processes. What you are doing in this particular one is essentially continuous improvement in a quality terms of whatever it is that you're doing at the moment. So it could be new businesses or procedures, it could be new roles and responsibilities, it could be organizational restructuring, it could be putting in new equipment or facilities, or it could even be new skills to learn for the people. All of these things can be put in a radical way, or it can be put in an incremental way. So which way is best? Which one is best? A mixed. Not sure whether I've actually got this one in here. No, let me just go back. I won't go on to Gundamima just yet. Because I'm actually going to do some ice skating in a second. So it's always very difficult doing ice skating in these sorts of environments. What we have found to get continuous improvement within organizations, that the best type of restructuring, and it needs to be continuous, is that you see a need for a radical change, and you make it. You make these radical changes. And once you've made that radical change, you do some small incremental improvements until you can see a next radical change. And then we can move on like this. Then we see some more continuous improvements, big steps followed by small steps. And it needs to be this continuous process of seeing ways at which you can change in a radical sense, and then little steps of incremental improvements to improve that, until you get to a stage where you can say, now we can do this. That's the ideal. Whether people are able to do this or capable of doing it is a different thing. But theoretically, that's what we should be thinking about when we're talking about operational changes. Of radical changes, and then incremental changes, until we see the next big one that comes. No Germans here. Any Germans? This is very, very disheartening. Gunder Niemann was a German. Has anybody ever heard of Gunder Niemann? No? By the way, I need your pen. I'm sorry. Oh, there's one spare one. Okay. You may need to write this. Gunder Niemann was an ice skater, an Olympic ice skater. Do you ever watch the Winter Olympics? They have a process. As I say, it's very difficult to skate on a carpet like this. But you keep your skates on the ice for as long as possible. And you hold your Is it something like this? Any skaters here? Any ice skaters? You don't get a lot of ice skaters in Sharjah, do you? Let's be realistic. But long track ice skaters anyway. But they travel, they have a process by which they can do it. So Gunda Niemann just happened to be this German woman that was head and shoulders above everybody else. She was so far ahead of the opposition that no one was actually saying who's going to win the gold medal. They were going to say, who's going to be winning the silver medal today? She was that far ahead of her opposition, which is a pretty good position to be in, yes? So just before the Nagano Olympics in Japan in 98, in the 98 Nagano Olympics, somewhere around the first part of 98 anyway, the Skating Federation decided that they would allow a new type of skate to be used in competition. And this particular skate was different from your normal skates that you use on an ice rink. You know, the normal skate is, there's the blade down here, yes, and there's the boot, or the sole of the boot. And you go down there? And it was attached here, and it was attached there. So, yeah, we follow that? Just an ordinary ice skate. But the Skating Federation said, no, we're going to allow this new type of skate which people had been experimenting with. And it was a skate, let's say we're going in this particular direction. It was a skate where it was a hinge on this particular one, but it wasn't attached here at all. It wasn't attached. So the blade would actually go like this. So it would allow somebody to lean in and push while the skate was still on the ground. It hadn't come off the ice. Otherwise, if you're pushing, you know, only bits of your skate are going to come up. I mean, theoretically, it was a pretty good idea, was it not? It's actually called a clap skate. And it was called a clap skate because when this came down, it would make the sound of a clap. So they said to all of the skaters that were going to the Nagano Olympics, you can use these clap skates. You're allowed to use these clap skates. So everyone actually went out there and they all tried the clap skates. And to her horror, Gunda Niemann went slower on the clap skates than she did with her traditional skates. Even though theoretically she was supposed to go faster, she actually went slower. She went so much slower that the opposition was now ahead of her with the traditional skates. And she said, ooh, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to change. I'm going to stick with my traditional skates, which she did right up to the time of the Nagano Olympics. However, her competition had nothing much to lose. They knew that they were going to be in second place anyway. So, yes, whether they were 10 seconds behind or 12 seconds behind at the end of the race, it didn't really make much difference. So what they did is that they tried the skates, and they too went slower initially. But they stuck with it. Generally, they stuck with this new change that was taking place with the skates. And over time, leading up to the Nagano Olympics, you know what happened. The guys that did change found out that these skates were in fact better, but there was a new technique in using those particular skates. And by the time they got to the Nagano Olympics with their clap skates, they in fact were faster than Gunda Niemann. And Gunda Niemann did pretty well in the Nagano Olympics, but she didn't win all the gold medals because her opposition actually got up to her. By accepting, and this is the point of this, by accepting the fact that if you're going to change an operation, you are sometimes have to go backwards in order to jump better, to go further in the end. Sometimes you have to go backwards. You have a decrease in performance.